Hi, this is Sabin Bharti and we are here at Linode headquarters in Philadelphia. And today we have with us CEO and founder of Linode, Christopher Aker. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is 16th anniversary of Linode, is that correct?
That is correct.
So let's walk back to the memory lane or history lane.
Sure.
When and why you created Linode?
The idea for Linode became apparent in this era, in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when you really only had two different options. One was shared web hosting, which was inexpensive, but you didn't have a lot of administrative control. Or on the other flip side, you had dedicated machines, which was a little bit soul-sucking to keep running, and you had to worry about power supplies and hard drive failures, and was very expensive, was inefficient. We didn't have kind of this metaphor of controls that we have now that the cloud has brought with it, you know, the benefits of things being composable and ephemeral and on demand. And so virtualization became a pretty obvious thing that was going to disrupt the dedicated or co-location market. And it was really about empowering people, giving them access to sharing in the cost of the box with other people, but yet retaining that administrative control. And just like Linux and all the other open source movements has been about democratizing or putting the capabilities into the hands of the people that they may not have otherwise had access to. So in that way, I feel like Linode helped make virtual machines and make Linux machines, and having your own virtualized machine that much more accessible to people.
But it was something like that happened, like the way with Newton, Apple fell, and but something happened. You said you music and all that. Something happened where you're like, hey, I have to do this.
Well, I quit my job, so that was a pretty big pressure. I had to figure out something, and I had a bunch of crazy ideas. Some of them not so crazy. But yeah, I remember it happening in two phases. One, I came up with the idea, and really the idea was for virtualization, for what we all call the cloud today. But what made that possible was this amazing piece of software called User Mode Linux, or UML, and it was written primarily by an absolutely brilliant engineer named Jeff Dyke, and I think he was with Intel a few years in, and he may still be there. I haven't looked him up in a while. But Jeff did an amazing thing. When you port the Linux kernel to a new architecture, you port it to match the machine language of whatever processor it is that you're using. Well, instead of doing that, Jeff ported the Linux kernel to run on top of user space. And so in this way, he basically turned the Linux kernel into a user space program. And you literally could run /Linux and hit return and see all the boot messages. And so that was pretty amazing, actually. And so my job at that point was to develop the orchestration software, the control panel, the billing system, the software that would run on the machines that we now call hypervisors, to kind of drive all that. But that was really the crux of it. So that was kind of phase one, when I realized that this was technically possible. And then two, when I came up with the name, Linode.
What is the story behind the name itself?
Well, I was probably laying on my couch watching reruns of MASH, if I remember correctly. And I was trying to come up with a name for this, and I had some terrible ones, including I'm not even sure I wanted. I'm not going to admit some of the names that I had came up with. They were so bad. But Linode was a really great name. It's a combination of Linux and Node. Okay. And I just imagine people saying, my Linode.
Okay.
Something that was personal to them.
16 years.
Yep.
Right. So first of all, how are you celebrating? How are your users celebrating?
We had a picnic last week for the company. And was
it a virtual picnic or a real picnic?
No, it was a physical picnic.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had hot dogs and hamburgers and chicken and that kind of thing, and it was fun. So that was a great thing that everybody did. Our birthday was actually yesterday, technically, but we're kind of we're so old now. We're not celebrating like our birthday anymore. We kind of celebrate for the entire week or the entire month.
But you're not still on drinking age, right? It's only 16.
Correct. Yes, but I did hear that this is the champagne birthday, which apparently, if your age is the same day of the month as your birthday, it's called your champagne birthday, which doesn't really seem fair because I was born on the 4th, so I missed my champagne opportunity.
And how are you users celebrating? Are you giving them some gifts?
We are.
What are they? I'm a user too, so I'm excited about it as well.
Okay. Well, we're starting off with two things. One is that we're going to be reducing the price of our Node Balancer product from $20 a month to $10. So right off, like as of tomorrow, the Node Balancer will be half the price it used to be. And then we're doing an incremental improvement to our dedicated Linode plans. Those are the type of Linodes where the virtual CPU cores are actually pinned to CPU cores on the host. They're one-to-one relationship. They're discretely yours. Nobody else can use them. And we introduced the dedicated plans earlier this year. And we're bringing up the disk space specs that these come with to be on parity with the equivalent shared plan. And this way, it's going to make people migrating to and from that much more smooth.
You're cutting the pricing, of this model. And what is, I think, unique about Linode is also that you're not VC funded.
Correct.
So first of all, why you decided not to take VC money, number one. Number two is that how do you not only survive and sustain and also stay profitable?
Sure.
Because you're also investing a lot of, I saw your R&D, I was not allowed to be inside, but I saw it from the outside.
Oh, good, okay.
So you have R&D, you're spending money in Kubernetes, all the new technologies. How do you kind of still maintain and manage everything?
I mean, this business has been bootstrapped from the beginning. I started with, I think, $10,000 or $11,000 in the bank, and I quit my job. I had the reason why this whole thing happened was, and to finish the story from earlier, is that I had given myself a very loose goal of being independently employed by the time I was 30. So in my late 20s, I think I was 29 in fact, I quit my job, had a great job at a tech company in Nashville, really enjoyed Nashville. It's way different now than it was back then. And didn't have any clue what I was going to do, but I knew that I wanted to give myself a year to see if I could make something work. And if it didn't work out, no big deal. I would go get another job, and it was one of those things that I would have regretted not trying it, rather than regretting if I had and failed. So came up with the idea, came up with a name. I had 12 months of living expenses saved up, and I got to work. And I wrote all the software, I wrote the website, the billing system, the ticketing system, the platform, the orchestrate. I mean, not well, let's just put it that way, but enough to get the thing off the ground, and launched it 8 months later.
So unlike Steve Jobs, you did not have a voice neck to do it. So you're doing all the coding yourself.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yep.
So still, once again, why you decide not to take any VC money? And
I just didn't know any better. And I mean, I credit ignorance to a lot of my success. Frankly.
How different things would have been if you take their money?
I think I probably wouldn't be here. I think the company would be much different, potentially much larger, most likely it would have gotten acquired along the way, and that would have been the last you ever heard of it. That's what I think is probably the most likely outcome. Do I regret it? I mean, it depends on what your objectives are. And this is an area that I've had to do a lot of soul searching on and thinking about, because we are successful. We are generating, significant amount of capital, enough to reinvest in ourselves and to continue to grow. And the purpose of all of this becomes something that you question. But what keeps me coming back every day is it's a multitude of things, and I think we're incredibly lucky and privileged to be in the scenario that we're in, where we are independent, so we can make good decisions that typically, the best decision and the best profit decision aren't always in alignment. And we get to make, hopefully the best decisions we can. And we're solving what I hope is a meaningful problem for people. We're empowering people. We're giving them access to technologies that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise had. And maybe that was more true in the past than it is recently with all the competitors, and this whole cloud computing thing is ubiquitously available. But we're definitely offering it a really great value. And all the meanwhile, we're creating jobs and hopefully developing people, and hopefully doing something good for our local community here with the restoration of this great building. And generally, trying to find that balance between being complete corporate capitalists and trying to do something that's meaningful and put something good out into the world.
Yeah. What kind of culture Linode has? Because you said you are not looking at typical hardcore corporate venture.
Sure.
So can you talk about the culture of Linode?
I can try. I might be too close to it, honestly. This might be something that's better observed than described from within, especially, I guess, from my vantage point too. But I mean, it's a lot has changed for us in the last 2 years, 24 months. A lot has changed. And if you had asked me that question 2 years ago, the answer would have been a lot less complex, because we were a flat organization. It was, a couple bosses and then there was everybody else. And I mean, I still enjoy that. I still like that. Unfortunately, practicalities of reporting structures and that kind of thing, and the whole pizza or two pizza rule kicks in when you start. We've added almost 100 people in the last 18 or 20 months or so, and part of that too was to try and flex, to try and take advantage of these opportunities that we had, that we saw to grow. We just needed more people. So we've added a bunch of people. We've moved into this building in the city. We were in a small shore town in New Jersey up until here, and we have introduced a lot of kind of structural change to the company, and I think we're still figuring out a way to acclimate to that, while still holding on to what I believe is part of the core of our culture here, which is let's just apply common sense. Let's do the right thing for the customer. Let's build good technology, build good products. Make sure we don't let anybody down. Yeah.
First off, why did you change the location from there to here, and why you chose this building?
We struggled with, my joke is it's really hard to run a high-tech company from a small, sleepy shore town in southern New Jersey. As quaint as that is, it's just super impractical. We had no sense of community. There were no contemporary companies like us to interface with, and we made the decision that we needed to move into a metropolitan area, and we evaluated everything: Boston, New York, San Antonio, Miami, San Francisco, of course, Southern California. And Philly made a lot of sense. I mean, it was the capital of the United States at one point. It's the 5th or 6th largest city in the United States. They have a tech scene that I think is maybe still growing, still small and still growing. And not only that, but it was much more obtainable to retain those important and key employees, everybody, if it was a 45-minute drive away than something that's 15 states away. But when I began the hunt, this was actually the second attempt. First one was like 2012, 2013. We found a building, came pretty close to signing. It needed a bunch of work, just like this one did. And for whatever reason, the timing just wasn't right. And so we put a hold on that. And then I don't know, 6 or 8 months went by, and it became apparent again that we really needed to do something. We really needed to get us into the city, and we were missing opportunities. And so one Sunday morning, Aaron showed me the front page of the local newspaper's website, and it was a picture of this building. And, this building is famous or infamous for being the scene of the Real World Philadelphia MTV show. And I looked at the picture and I said, that's it. And I made a phone call to the realtor, and we were here the next day. Now, unfortunately, the building wasn't sellable. And so it actually went into foreclosure. And this whole process took 6 months. And then they went dark for another couple of months. And then when they came back, it was actually another 6 months. So it took a year just for them to get their act together before it came up for sale again. We closed Thanksgiving week in 2015. 2016 was permits and plans. 2017 was construction. And then we moved in the beginning of 2018.
And this is a bank. They also have, I've seen the wall. So that's where the data center is, in the wall behind the wall.
It's technically not a data center, but this building is for humans, not for customers, not for customer equipment. But there's been a bank building here since 1858. In fact, this room that we're being interviewed in was the original vault of the bank building that was on this corner from 1858.
So you have all the codes, so we won't get locked in the building, right?
We won't. No, we're good. We're good.
Okay. You touched upon the evolution, that from single server to virtualization to now cloud. And if I'm not wrong, I think Linode predates AWS. I'm sure Amazon was working on AWS for a while.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah, but so if you look back at when you started Linode versus where we are today, the evolution of how people are running their workloads, can you talk about that? And what role is Linode playing in this whole paradigm, and where do you see what role you have played in enabling people to be able to run their workloads on cloud?
Well, I think that when virtualization came around and Linode came around, we made it very easy for you to create many machines, many virtual machines. Not so easy to do in the physical world. It takes a lot of coordination and effort and capital expense and operating expense as well. So now you could click a button, have a virtual machine provisioned within seconds or minutes. So now you have a new problem. Now you can create 50 or 100 or whatever number of virtual machines that you can no longer manage them all. And so that was the impetus for things like configuration management and orchestration, but it was still very much limited to, one VM at a time. And the world works by abstracting away the complexities of the past and creating a new abstraction, and that's kind of how we keep going down this metaphor. But we've had kind of the benefits of things like containerization and Docker, which try and kind of optimize that whole experience of trying to package and deploy whatever it is, your application or whatever you're trying to run on a virtual machine or in a container. But I think we haven't really addressed the problem yet of abstracting the metaphor of the cloud away. And my understanding is, if I understand this correctly, that is one of the goals of Kubernetes, is to kind of keep this environment that is cloud aware, meaning it knows that it can be running on multiple things. It understands things like failure domains and zones and data centers, and even at the cabinet level, power and so on, and provides what I think will be a consistent environment for people to deploy cloud applications into.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. Right. But again, it's about abstracting it away.
Right. But what is the beauty of Linode versus when I look at AWS or GCP and everything else is that, while you do abstract things, you also, like, for example, me, I want access to the kernel, I want to play with that. So with Linode, I get access to not everything abstracted. So sometimes I don't want abstraction.
Correct.
So that is also there. But what are the core components of, this is a question for the open source audience as well. What is Linode made of?
We have things running that that were bleeding edge, then mainstream, and are now passé. That's how long we've been around. The technologies that we've built this platform on, have come and gone. So our approach to this, or at least something that I'm ambitious for us to continue down a path, is, we've tried to figure out what are the components of our legacy systems that remain, that we can replace, one at a time. So we've gotten just a little bit into microservice, and these are all more philosophical, architectural approaches than any one hardcore technology. But I'm being as old as we are, it's stuff like Perl, MySQL. We use a lot of R&D tool in our toolkit. Those are probably like the biggest of kind of the legacy techs. But everything from here forward has been Python. We're using React and that whole ecosystem for our cloud manager.
What are the technologies that you think, like as you mentioned Kubernetes, there are serverless. I mean, the technologies are coming on weekly basis. Every 6 months you see a new technology or paradigm or buzzword, whatever you call it. Which are the ones that you are excited about, either personally,
sure,
or from the point of view of Linode?
Well, I think it takes time for some of these bleeding edge technologies to mature, and for kind of the ecosystem to frankly to define, what the winner is and where you should follow. Even Kubernetes. I'm probably going to mess this up, but it's been in development for maybe 3 or 4 years now, and even up until very recently, I would say it's been very volatile in the sense that it's moving very, very quickly, very, very hard to kind of keep up with it. But I think that it's figured itself out and is calming down, and we've been working on our Kubernetes offering for a while now, and we hope to have it into early access or public beta sometime in the next 2 months, and definitely into production before the end of the year. I've always been a fan of implementing technologies that solve our own problems, because if we're having these problems at our scale, other people are probably facing the same issues. So I think what is next up for us is, we're trying to make these problems easier, and we're trying to address the problems that the majority of people are facing, and also to eliminate the amount of redundant work that every one of our customers is going through the same problems and implementing the same solutions to the same issues, and all of that expenditure of effort. If we can solve a problem for them, we can really help accelerate innovation and people getting down to what matters most, which is running their business or getting these technical hurdles out of their way so they can move forward. So next up in the queue for us is probably database as a service, at least in some range of use case, kind of the middle, the low to kind of medium high usage type database as a service solution. And then something else that we're really excited about is bringing the benefits of bringing the metaphor of the cloud in terms of things being composable and ephemeral and on demand to a bare metal concept. So when you go to add a server, you dial up the same options as you would for a virtual machine, but when you hit the submit button, an actual bare metal machine is deployed and dedicated for you only.
You are working on this database as a service. What are the others? Let's just talk about what are the services that Linode offers.
So we have virtual machines, and that is across every single one of our data centers. That's our core product. 90% of probably our offerings are virtual machine related. We've got a load balancing as a service, which we call Node Balancer, very conveniently named there. We have a managed backup service that, so those three things are all related. And that is, daily backups that rotate in and out. And it was designed to be completely fire and forget. So we wanted the amount of friction, the barrier to you getting your data backed up, at least in one place, to be as simple as possible. So that was the design objective for the backup service. We have block storage. We are weeks away from announcing our object storage early adopter program. That's been an effort that we've been working on for quite some time. We have GPU instances, which will likely be announced tomorrow. And we're calling that a pilot program. It's not a beta program, it's more of a pilot program because it's in limited availability, and we're trying to put this out into the market early so that we can figure out, did we price this correctly? Is this the solution that customers want? But we're committed to that, and this is just the first iteration for our GPU offering. And then we talked about Kubernetes. That'll be around in the next couple months. Are
you working on the Kubernetes distribution, or you're just enabling customers to use their own Kubernetes?
It's a bit of a combination of both. The initial go is that you can click button, get Kubernetes cluster. And you'll have root access to all the nodes. We'll provide a free master, and it's not a redundant master, so it's just a single master for us to start off with. But we back up etcd, I think, measured in seconds. So the thing is pretty resilient. But you'll have complete root access to the nodes, and you can run, of course, any type of container that you want within that. Something that we didn't really talk about, or don't talk about much, or haven't talked about yet, is something that we've been calling internally the next-gen network. And next-gen network is a completely encapsulated network within a network. It's transparent to the user, but allows us to do incredible things. Basically, we've made our network a completely software-defined network. And the types of features that we'll be enabling for customers in the near future will be per customer VLANs. So you can actually have private connectivity between all of your primitives that we just listed. And it's all completely software driven. You can change it, you can redefine it. We basically can model any type of sophisticated, complex connectivity that you desire. You'll be able to do that. You'll be able to control how many virtual network interfaces each one of your virtual machines has, and what type of traffic is on the other end.
And most of the things that you are building is based on open source technologies, right?
It is.
So with the object storage, are you working with Ceph, or what are you?
It's Ceph. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you also work with these open source communities who's you consume?
Our engineers do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The typical open source model, where you work with the code.
Yep. In the same way that many other people who participate and contribute to open source projects, right. If there are IRC or Slack channels and email lists and that kind of thing.
How critical is open source to Linode?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we would not be here without open source software. 100%.
And looking at the trend where open source has almost become, the de facto software development model. Yep. Do you think that trend will continue, or?
I hope so. I really hope so. We so our cloud manager is completely open source. Source goes up on GitHub, and it is only one half of the component. The server side and whatnot are proprietary and closed. But not for philosophical reasons, more for practical and business reasons, and yeah. Right. But I would love for us and anybody else encourage them to make their source code open source.
There's one thing when you mentioned storage, a database as a service. Some trends which are happening there are not kind of pro open source, because a lot of companies are struggling. It's not that AWS is a threat to them. It's basically their own business model. Open source has already posed. Red Hat. Oracle can take Red Hat's code.
Yep.
For Oracle Linux. It's the same code base. But you don't come up with those kind of things. So what happens in those cases is that venture VCs force them to make compromises with their customers. So instead of serving their customers, they start serving their VCs.
Yeah.
So that also happens there. So I think you dodged that bullet.
Probably.
Yeah. But do you plan to go public at some point?
No plans. I mean, never say never, but no.
So what is the long-term goal of Linode?
Hopefully solving a meaningful problem for folks, giving them, empowering them, perhaps giving them access to technologies that they wouldn't have otherwise had access to. And when we talk about our mission statement and we're trying to accelerate innovation, I mean, innovation isn't the only part of it, but it's just the best word we could kind of distill this down into. But for me, I tell a story all the time about the company that I worked for in Nashville, and they were a Microsoft shop, and they were bought into Oracle, and we had a big HP UX rack running our database, and I'll never forget the day that we paid 6 figures to Microsoft to get another serial number that allowed the Microsoft SQL Server to access the 4 additional cores that were already in the machine that the licensing did not allow it to have access to. And it wasn't that long ago, 15, 20 years, where you did not have access to relational database. If you didn't work for a company that made millions of dollars that could afford to pay these licensing fees. And I just find that so mind-blowing. And it's one of the things that I think if there was ever an unsung effect, or maybe it is sung, of the open source movement and the open source philosophy, it's that it put into the hands technologies that people would have otherwise never had the opportunity to have. And I mean, I know it's a little corny, but it's like, imagine how many Picassos there are, or someone different than that. Use your own analogy. If they had only had access to paints and a brush and a canvas. So, I mean, I guess kind of on the coattails of that open source philosophy, I kind of feel like we've at least helped do our part as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Before we wrap this up, you started the company. You were sitting in a bank vault. So I don't know how much free time you get, but if you do get, what do you do in the free time? What are your hobbies? You mentioned music initially.
Yeah. I don't play music anymore, or record music, which is what I did for just a little bit, just like a little bit of, it was a lifetime ago. So a passion of mine is restoring antique BMW motorcycles, and pursuing, finding parts to make them more correct. And it's a neat little small weird niche. But yeah, it's a lot of fun working with my hands. So like, you just restore for yourself or for, friends or customers? Or? No customers, just for myself. And
so how many bikes you have?
Like over 40. So.
That's a big fleet there.
It's a big fleet, yeah. It's a pain in the butt.
So this is a bigger fleet than your GPUs that you're offering.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Christopher, so much for talking today. And I actually look forward to talking to you again because you have so many stories to tell.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for interviewing.